can. A recording of the presentation will be made available. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jeremiah Ouyang, an industry analyst with the Altimeter Group and the author of the popular blog, Web Strategy. So Jeremiah, take it away.
Hey, thank you, and thanks for being here live in the hangar, our office here in San Mateo. I'm here to talk to you about integrating social in your website, but the first thing is to recognize that Mark Zuckerberg is the man, the person of the year in Time Magazine. And this, like the 49ers in 1849, went to this gold rush to run to Facebook. We're seeing the same things today when it comes to brands running to Facebook as quick as you can. Now, I just want to warn you, despite the gold rush to Facebook, you need to have a strategy when it comes to integrating social. Don't just give all your hard-earned traffic to Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg without having a plan. In fact, we're seeing some companies, this is a screenshot that a blogger took and started to mark up the Washington Post, and all of those red squares that you see there are Facebook integration points on one article. This one has actually 12 points of integration. That's a very inconsistent strategy, and it's a disruptive user experience. In my opinion, this hasn't been thought out, and I want to make sure by the end of today's session that you have a strategy. So I'm here to talk to you about the evolution of your website, and I'm here to present with you for the first time a roadmap for the social integration. We have a framework here at Altimeter Group that we will be publishing an entire research report on, but today we're going to show you a sneak preview. So quickly to start off with, let's talk about trust. And we know that customers trust each other more than they trust brands. And this is why companies are running to Facebook, because there's a trusted discussion happening there. And now we want to bring that same discussion back to our corporate websites. What's interesting is if you watch the Super Bowl, actually, now that I mentioned it, every time you look at a TV advertisement on TV, count the many of times that you actually see companies linked to facebook.com/brand. Take a look at MasterCard here, or this hospital on the left-hand side. Companies are so eager to send this traffic to Facebook, but about forgetting how to integrate it back into your corporate website. So in this actual framework graphic, you'll see that this is how companies are thinking of their strategy with social. On the left is this traditional website. And over the last 10, 15 years, we've spent millions and millions of dollars trying to get people to come to our corporate websites and improve those user experiences there, the design, the development, and the servers. Lots of investments over this last decade and plus. And what we think about right now is these are two different things. The social web is a disparate place. I can't begin to count the number of times I've been asked, hey, Jeremiah, should I build or join? Well, the answer actually is yes. You do both. And the way that I want you to think about is you integrate all of these pieces together in one seamless strategy, where the corporate website is feeding the social web and social networks are feeding your corporate website. They work in tandem. In fact, this is the customer lifecycle right here. And the top part of this is the traditional marketing funnel, from awareness down to consideration, comparison, intent, and then eventually implementation and actually then purchase. Then companies start to, you see your customers will implement products and self-support each other and renew. So think about how do you integrate social across the entire customer lifecycle, not just pre-sales, not just post-support, but the entire piece. And this is going to reflect on your website because in many cases, your website reflects the entire customer journey. So think about all of those different pieces. I want to tell you about our research at Altimeter. We published a report, and we surveyed 140 global national corporations to find out what are your top goals for 2011 when it comes to social business. And do you know what they told me? And this is why over 600 people signed up for this webinar today, and there's hundreds on the phone, because you told us that the #1 goal in your go-to-market is integrating social into your corporate website. In fact, we let companies pick up to 3 responses. That's why it's more than 100% in this research. But website integration took the top, was the #1 moniker that's on the lips of strategists yourselves. In fact, we started to look at the data on how people are spending. The majority of spending is on staffing. We know that social is a lot of resource intensive, a lot of soft costs that are involved with these things. But custom technology development, that's that second line down, and we segmented it by different types of companies on maturity from beginner to intermediate, which we call formalized, or to advanced. And you can see as companies become very advanced, they spend considerable amount more per year, up to $270,000 per year, integrating social technologies into existing systems. So we know this is the future, that this integration path is starting to happen, and the dollar amounts are lining up to that right now. Okay, great. So we have some investments, but Jeremiah, you're not really telling me how do we do this. So here's the framework that I promised you, and this is really a maturity roadmap on how you will actually integrate these pieces together. And by the way, you'll get these slides, the replays will be available, and I'll be publishing this image on my blog so you can understand it. Okay, so voila, here it is. Now, 2 years ago, I had one around the evolution, well, a year and a half ago, on the evolution of the integration, and we've updated it since because the market continues to change. It's a very fast-paced place. Now, we found that there's actually 5 major use cases when it comes to in the dark blue when it comes to integrating social. And I'm going to walk you through each of those steps and give you some practical examples of what companies are doing. And underneath some of those use cases, you'll see that there's sub-pieces underneath them, specific deployments, those childs and those steps like under number 2, and we'll talk about those. So let's start at 0. 0 means you're not doing anything. You're not integrating social into your website at all. And in my opinion, it means that your website is irrelevant. Yeah, I said irrelevant, because there's a trusted discussion happening in the social networks, but you're not connected to it at all. So your investments are not working together. They're not tied to each other. It doesn't work out. So I'm going to show you examples. Let's look at number 0, no integration at all. When we took this screenshot a couple months ago, I love Trader Joe's. I go there all the time. They have a fantastic website, nicely branded, but we don't see any integration of social on their website at all. Now, this is very fascinating because when our research team went to go look at it, we found that they had a thriving social media presence in Facebook, Twitter, and then other places where they're being discussed. But those disparate efforts were not connected to the corporate website, so you have a fragmented customer experience. Okay, so you definitely want to skip that one. That's why you're here today. You want to figure out how do we get past this. Well, let's take a look at the next major use case, and this is what we call number 1, social linking. And social linking is actually the step I want you to skip. That's right. Even though we have this on here, I think it's a very bad idea to do this use case. Let me tell you why. Social linking, let me show you an example, is linking away from your corporate website to a Facebook page or a Twitter account or MySpace or YouTube or anything else like this. In my opinion, this is how Mark Zuckerberg became the man of the year, because many brands are sending their hard-earned traffic over the last 10 to 15 years right over to Facebook and Twitter. Well, Mark thanks you. You're definitely helping the company reach its tremendous valuation by sending all this traffic there. So this is actually, I think, a bad idea. When you get customers to come to your point of conversion on your website, the last thing you want to do is send them away quickly. Now, of course, my friends at Facebook and Twitter, debate me on this one, but I'm going to stand firm on this one. I actually don't want to see you do this. Okay, so let me show you some other examples. McDonald's has done this away. They link away, and also with their TV ads. And when we looked at their actual experience, it's odd because they had pop-ups and saying, you are leaving the McDonald's website. You know, it's just very confusing on how it was being done. I recognize this is early years, and people are still struggling with how to connect these things. But this is not a good experience to have these pop-ups saying, you're about to leave our corporate website. We knew that. So that's the first use case, and I encourage you to skip that one, linking directly away. Instead, and here's where I encourage you to start if you have to start, is to aggregate the trusted discussion in social networks right back to your website. So we're going to talk about these, and there's 3 sub-things underneath these things under social aggregation. You can pull in just basic feeds, all of the mentions of your brand or a product type or a TV show or media. Or 2B, you can curate the top conversations that are happening in that space and try to have a little bit more of a relevant discussion that's on context. Or 2C, you can contextually aggregate depending on the type of content that's available. So let me show you some examples on level 2, social integration, as we move up this maturity roadmap. I like this example here from Windows 7. This is sort of a consumer play, but yet it's in the technology space. And what Microsoft is doing here, and they're aggregating tweets, what people are saying about Windows 7. And it's basically all mentions of Windows 7. And you're probably saying, Jeremiah, what if there's bad stuff? What if they're criticizing the product? And I'm actually going to say that's okay. You want to allow for the good and the bad, but you want to strip out the ugly. So in this case, they're pulling in things, and some people are saying, to be fair, Chrome copied this from Windows 7 Arrow's taskbar, worked well there too, and how is this performance? So there's a lot of discussions back and forth about the product. This next example is a Huffington Post. And I think they do a fantastic job of social integration. We'll take a look at them as we move forward into the more advanced places. And what they're doing is pulling in the tweets and the content from other people that are reading these different stories from other third parties right onto the actual article itself. So you can read the article and then also understand what the community is thinking. Think of it like a digital zeitgeist of how people are reacting to this content. It's not limited to the online place as well. So when I went to South by Southwest, an interactive music and arts festival in Austin a couple weeks ago, I saw that Samsung was actually integrating and aggregating tweets from around the conference, the physical conference, and putting it onto their large screens and pulling it into their physical events. So they were you can use some of the same technology into your physical events and pulling that content right back in. And I think this is an effective way of allowing attendees to feel like they're part of the experience as well. Now, in order to get to the next level, where you're pulling in contextual aggregations around people that you actually know, your real friends, you have to allow for social sign-on. Now, we've heard of SSO in the past, which has been known in legacy IT departments as single sign-on, LDAP and Active Directory. But now we're starting to see a new form of login, and this is called social sign-on. Now, social sign-on is when you can log into a website using your existing credentials from a Facebook Connect or a Twitter or LinkedIn or Google or MySpace or whatever else comes around next. Now, social sign-on has its pluses and minuses for marketers. The pluses are the chances of you having more people sign up to your event or your website increase because the barriers to adoption are lower. In fact, maybe 1 or 2 clicks. Chances are the amount of information that profile has is accurate, far more than registration pages, because this is information they have opted in to share with their actual friends in Facebook. Now, the downside with social sign-on is you don't necessarily get their email address. You can't necessarily contact them, or you might not even get their profile information, depending on which social network it is. So that's the downside. But you could always direct a registration page at another time to get some of that key information. I've seen this on like the Sears community. After they use Facebook Connect, they also ask you for your email address. So there's workarounds to this. Now, in this case, NASDAQ has here social sign-on. So on the left-hand side, you can see the traditional registration form. And you know what? Consumers really don't like registration forms. I mean, I certainly don't. In fact, there's only really 2 reasons why companies, marketers want registration forms. It's so you can bug people and you can bug them even better later. That's really what registration forms are for. So given the option, consumers, normal consumers, may opt in to use social sign-on. It's simpler, it's easier, but as long as their personal information is not abused. So on the right-hand column, you can see the social sign-on opportunities from Facebook, Google, Twitter, and more. Now, back to aggregation, and that's the use case that we're focusing on here. The NFL is pulling in different tweets here. And this one is interesting. They're turning it into sort of a game. And we're going to hear more about from Chris later on gamification. But you can see that there's a Twitter battle in that area that we highlighted between the Packers and the Patriots. And the Patriots have a 10% margin here on the number of positive tweets or the engaged tweets. And they're using a tweet river in order to pull that discussion right in. Now, if this is not just limited to your website alone, if you have a software product, you're going to start to pull in these conversations right into the website itself. So Intuit is very far advanced when it comes to the social web. They have a lot of products that are software-based. And what they're doing is pulling in the community's discussion right from the forums right into the actual product. So you can see that the community and the content. This one is a interesting topic. They're talking about taxes in the context of were you married, and then you can see that there's people discussing about being divorced or single. So it is maybe an uncomfortable topic for some folks, taxes or divorce, but the point is there's contextual information from discussions happening right there. Okay, so that's the major first use case, social aggregation. Now the next thing, so that's pulling in information. The next thing to do is publish it back out. And this is what we call social publishing. And there's two discrete use cases underneath this one. 3A would be passive sharing. You're just allowing people to share whenever they feel like it. Well, the second piece of this is what I call active sharing. So this is encouraging people to share this, and this starts to foster a viral loop. I'll explain what that is later. So here on the NPR, you can see that they're allowing people to share content in a very passive way. And this is very similar to that first use case. I don't really think it's that effective. So you can choose to like the sites and share content. By the way, I'm seeing a trend lately where companies are hiding content until you choose to like the actual content. So I went to a website called honestly.com where you can rate your colleagues and stuff. That's a very touchy topic. But it said in order to see reviews that you had to like the honestly.com page. And of course that frustrated me as a consumer because it's like putting a carrot right in front of me in front of a gate. So I'm starting to see that trend emerge from some companies. Now, I like this example. Smart Money encourages readers to share this content from social networks. So this is how you want to really be active in encouraging them to do these things. At every single point of transaction along the customer lifecycle, you want to think about opportunities to encourage them to share, especially around a high activity where they've really indicated they've had an enjoyable experience, such as ratings or rankings, or they purchased something from you. Encourage them to share at that point in time. So you want to map this out in your customer lifecycle. Also here is AMC. As you're watching content, you can share this with other people, and eventually what I believe will happen is that these things will start to become automatic and dynamic, and we'll start to just leave trails, little digital breadcrumbs as we traverse the web and the real world, constantly sharing with each other. And we're already starting to see this with mobile devices and like new websites like Color appearing in different applications. So these digital breadcrumbs will be constantly sharing our path around the world. Okay, so that's level 3. I hope you're doing well. You're with me. I have one more to show you, and then a future state that doesn't even exist yet that you're going to get a sneak preview of today. Okay, so level 4. This one is very powerful. This is called social context. Now, if you're in marketing or you're in market research like how I was at Forrester as an analyst, we focused a lot on personas. And personas are a mythical way of looking at customers in a very broad sense. Like for me, Asian males age, actually I'm not going to tell you that, in the Bay Area, and you would start to think of these types of Asian males like me would like these different types of things. Well, over time, these broad personas are not going to be accurate because we will, number one, have very specific information about consumers that we can provide really personalized information based upon their behaviors and their social data. And this is what we call this use case of social context. And there's 2 levels underneath that. The first one is social content, and this is based upon your profile. So my Twitter profile or my Facebook profile. Asian male, lives in Silicon Valley, likes these types of behaviors, has done these things. The second one is social context around my contacts, people I actually know, trust, and perhaps love. So those are the two ways that you can apply that type of data in order to provide customers with personalized experiences. Let me show you some examples that really helps to crystallize it. So first of all, this is not new at all. In fact, Amazon has been serving up content on its shopping carts and its product pages based upon your friends for a number of years. But unfortunately, that actual use case has only been within Amazon. Now we can start bringing it to our own websites. Take, for example, TripAdvisor has a Facebook Connect type of offering where once you log in, you can look at different cities like here in New York and see which one of your friends has been to New York and what do they recommend for you to do. What are the top things to do and what are the top things to avoid? So this is an example of that second use case of looking at the content around your social friends. Now, this is very valuable because it can increase the potential engagement because you're seeing that trusted discussion of people around you. Now, with everything in web strategy, there's always an upside and a downside. The downside with social context is that you may not be able to expose customers, or you might not be open to new ideas if everything's just built around our profile and people around us. Now, back to Huffington Post. I interviewed Paul, the CTO. This team is brilliant, by the way, the type of stuff they've been doing to integrate social into the world's top blog, and they've been doing it for a few years. In fact, they were one of the first websites to actually do this social context. Now, many websites have editors, and editors are the chief of the company. They determine the content that's going to be on these news sites. Well, Huffington Post definitely has editors, but they also have Facebook Connect, and they're able to allow your friends to become your editor. And this means that when you visit the site and you log in with Facebook, Huffington Post has social news, and you can see Christina, our researcher here, who's logged into this experience. And people that she actually knows will recommend content to her based upon their likes and different behaviors. So let's think about what this means. This is actually very powerful, and I know that Levi's and other e-commerce companies have done this on recommending products. This is not limited to media only. So this means that somebody within 2 clicks of coming to your website can have a personalized and contextual experience, even if they've never been to your website before. Remember that model I showed you of the marketing funnel? It means that we take people from awareness all the way down to consideration in just 2 clicks. Social sign-on is very powerful when you apply this use case of social context. In the long run, by the way, what this means that if we're delivering the right content and the right products to customers when they need it, advertising diminishes. Because instead of disruptive advertising, content that's useful to us, true information, starts to surface more frequently. This is a powerful change in the way that we're going to see content media in e-commerce. Okay, this last phase, and you're probably wondering, what is this about? Okay, well, this one doesn't exist, and we call this seamless integration. And my vision of the future of the social web is that you will not be able to tell the difference between the social web and your corporate website. In fact, in this not too distant future, URLs and domains and websites as we know them disappear. In fact, content is just assembled on the fly based upon information that you have or your location data in a mobile device. We can talk about that in another episode or something like that. But essentially, in this state, content will just assemble wherever you are. So the way that we navigate to information now will change forever and evolve. Now, we're starting to see little pieces of this start to emerge. Take, for example, vitaminwater. They temporarily shut down their corporate website and put everything on Facebook. So they're willing to push all of this where the social effort is and taking that corporate content and repurposing it elsewhere. So that's early examples. Now, what about on the flip side? Yeah, we have an example here. So Skittles, you probably remember this about a year or 2 ago, turned their entire corporate site into the Wikipedia page and just a running Twitter list of what people were saying. Some of the content was definitely off-brand. So they're really trying to just integrate social. So we're seeing people swing the pendulum from left to right here, but there hasn't been this true seamless integration use case. It's still very, very early in these days. So that's my vision. I walked you through 0 and then 5 different use cases on how I want you to think about deploying your maturity roadmap for integrating social. I laid it out for you, gave you concrete examples and some pluses and minuses for each of those different deployments. Now, I'd just like to leave you with some final remarks, and then we'll pass it over to Tor. So use this roadmap that I presented, and yes, you'll get the replay slides. Make sure you follow these folks on their Twitter accounts and you receive this as a roadmap, and just watch for the research that we're going to be providing in this space. First thing is a mindset. Product pages, and this is going to be hard for some product managers, are not just about products anymore. In fact, the future of product pages they're about the community and the customers and what they think, believe, and how they want the products to evolve over time. Involve the community's mindset into all of the products and your news and your corporate website. Second of 3 points. Not all corporate web pages are equal. You cannot integrate social into your thousands or hundreds to, thousands of different web pages on your site. So start with the pages that are already being talked about or already being shared, where there's a high tendency of that social behavior. Your corporate homepage, the news page, some of the product pages, the support pages. Look for where there's already discussion starting to develop and start to prioritize those first. And then finally, I want to talk to you about a viral loop. So this isn't just about sending traffic to Facebook or just using social networks to send traffic to your corporate website. It's not or. It's not one or the other. It's yes. Join or build, it's yes. You do both. And the key here is to use both of them in tandem so they continue to feed each other and grow each other. And this is what's called a viral loop. And a viral loop is the amount of investment you put into this effort stays constant. Let's say you only have X amount of headcount and money you can spend on software and services into this. But because your customers are using that active and passive sharing to go back and recruit their friends, they come back to your effort and they continue to share and integrate, and they grow and they bring their friends. And the effort starts to exponentially grow, although your investment maintains constant. And if you achieve that, that's the destination for this, is a viral loop. Your investments stay constant, but your results go up exponentially. So that's the end goal in the social integration piece. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to pass it over to the team here. Tor, take it away.
Thanks, Jeremiah. That was incredibly informative, great examples, some best practices, some war stories, lessons learned, and a great roadmap. So thanks for that. I'm also just going to remind everybody to please continue submitting some questions. We're getting some nice ones coming in, and we'll be covering those in about 10-15 minutes. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chris Dugan, the CEO of BADGEVILLE, who's going to take us through some great examples of seamless integration. Chris, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Tor. Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Duggan, CEO and co-founder of BADGEVILLE, and we are excited to be associated with the research presented here today from Altimeter and Jeremiah. And Jeremiah talked about how to make your site social, and JANRAIN helps with this through social login to drive user acquisition, and BADGEVILLE helps with this through loyalty, rewards, and game mechanics to drive behavior and engagement. And our two companies are partnered together to help you make your site social. And in fact, we'd like to share with you some examples today that we think are very exciting. In fact, the first example is a partnership that we have with Universal Music Group, Island Def Jam, and Interscope Records, where they came to us to implement social sign-on, rewards, and a whole fan experience that you can see live right now on MatthewMorrison.com. And they're actually enrolling this out to dozens of other band and artist sites currently. And the exciting thing actually about this was that this was implemented in literally a matter of days. So also very easy to do. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So Universal wanted a whole fan experience. And as Jeremiah talked about this morning, it's not about creating a Facebook fan page and sending those users to Facebook. It's how do you create this whole experience on your own site within your own brand context and really kind of drive that user experience on your property. And so Universal here is using Badgeville to provide highly engaging leaderboards of fan behavior, not just across the entire community, but also using the social graph to provide contextual leaderboards just within your friends. And there's also fun and exciting achievements and social status that fans can earn by performing desired behaviors. And in this case, these behaviors are things like visiting, sharing, and contributing on this artist site. And you'll also notice that as you go through this experience that there's real-time activities being shown on the site, and it just makes the site feel alive and real-time and fun. And our feeling is that this is really all about surfacing the people and showing faces on sites and letting people connect with other people. That really is kind of that whole social experience that's quite easy to replicate within your own brand experience. As you navigate other parts of the site, you'll see that JANRAIN is actually powering their entire social login strategy, making it super easy for fans to authenticate, get connected, and start participating within this community. And there's even deep integration with other capabilities that are already on the site. In this case, commenting and user contributions being powered by a company named Echo, which is actually also partnered with JANRAIN and Badgeville. And the key thing here is to show reputation and achievements and accomplishments and that kind of overall sense of reputation and status across all aspects of the site experience. Again, very easy to deploy and deliver. And then you'll also notice at the bottom of the screen here that as users perform these desired behaviors, they get real-time notifications and feedback in the form of achievements and notifications to let them know that they're performing the exact desired behaviors that they can earn status and reputation around. And this is actually a perfect opportunity to kind of tie back to Jeremiah's points on how do you build the viral loop. And by the way, using these techniques that we've shown so far, we've been able to demonstrate a 50% increase in registrations for partner sites, over a 100% increase in user-generated content, and over 100% increase in social sharing activities. So these are very proven techniques that we're just applying to these kind of site experiences for all brands to take advantage of. Now I'd like to talk about Badgeville and introduce you to the company. So we are the social loyalty platform, and we believe that you can drive behavior using social mechanics. And this truly is an exciting time, I think, for all of us to be engaged in this kind of area because there's an intersection of social and social gaming and loyalty and analytics that really presents a tremendous opportunity for marketers and brand managers. And by applying these techniques, you can truly make your sites social. And in order to make your site social and effective, the key first step is to understand what your users are doing and who they are. And we believe that the next generation of analytics is all about providing insight into loyalty and user segmentation, not just page views. It's not about page view analytics anymore. It's about loyalty and user segmentation, and really starting to surface and develop advocates. And we believe that there's a tremendous wealth of knowledge that can be learned from social gaming companies when applying techniques to drive behavior to non-gaming experiences to actually move your users and your advocates up this ladder. And so how does it work? So the formula is starting with defining behaviors that you value and measuring them. And we have a system that facilitates that. And then the second part is providing status and reputation-based incentives that maximize lift on these desired behaviors. And by the way, when this is done in the context of a social experience, the results are highly effective. And by the way, consumers are just clamoring to get recognized for their loyalty and attention, and they are very receptive to these techniques. And once you start to tie behavior to identity and have a rewards and loyalty framework to support it, the analytics that come from that are extremely interesting in terms of how you start to manage your business. At Badgeville, we provide a turnkey system to implementing these experiences on your website. And so we believe that the building blocks of these experiences are highly consistent across communities, but it needs to be done in a white label way where you define behaviors and rewards, but do it in a way that's turnkey yet highly integrated. In closing, I'm just going to show you a couple of quick examples of some sites that we're working with. So here we see a content site where the goal is driving visits, reading, contributions, and sharing. And it's actually the context around this behavior framework is friendly competition. Fans are competing to be kind of the top users here. Interestingly enough, this customer actually had a sponsored reward program that required their audience to watch an entirety of a video, and thousands of fans claimed the limited edition achievement within the first 24 hours. And in fact, a quote that we had from one of the users was, "This is the longest time I've ever been on the computer." We can also apply these techniques to create collaborative experiences, where in this case, this is a health and fitness community where the goal is to work together to get more healthy and more fit. And so you can see here that the building blocks, again, are the same. Real-time streams, achievements, leaderboards, but in this context, collaborative leaderboards working together. And these techniques create highly social experiences that are very turnkey and actually drive significant amount of behavior. And then finally, we can also apply these techniques towards commerce activity. And so if you have a traditional shopping experience, there's a huge opportunity to make that social and do that in a turnkey fashion where you show the people, you show the activities in real time, and you even potentially reward for not just transactional behavior, but also for social interactions. And we believe that over the coming 6 to 12 months, this will just become the expectation of how consumers interact in a retail type of fashion. And in closing, so we've talked about how do you make social on your site and how can you use these techniques to really drive real value across your audience. And our take on it is it's about building loyalty, driving behavior, and gaining deep insight into your audience and the health of your community by using these techniques. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That was very informative and great examples that you shared there. I'm going to just have a few closing remarks, and then we're going to get to some of these questions that have been streaming in. Just to give everybody a quick overview on JANRAIN, we provide a comprehensive user management platform for the social web that allows sites to easily enable social login, social sharing, as well as the capturing of the rich user profile. As Jeremiah had mentioned, when somebody logs in with a Facebook account, the marketer can gain a lot more information about those users. They also need a place to store it and leverage it for their marketing activities. We also provide a single sign-on solution to enable web properties to create a rich environment across their ecosystem of websites. We're deployed on over 300,000 sites today and work with many customers across different verticals. We've also been easily integrated into other leading technology platforms that many customers are using today. I'm just going to give a couple quick case studies to kind of hammer home the points that Jeremiah was mentioning earlier. Sears was looking at more user acquisition and engagement tools. They initially deployed JANRAIN Engage on their community sites to allow people to easily enter the site and start engaging with the site. They then expanded to their e-commerce sites for their entire Sears portfolio, Kmart, Craftsman, and many other web properties that Sears controls. They also, as Jeremiah had shown in his roadmap earlier, they embraced the social sharing aspect so that as users were engaged on the website and, for example, here wrote a review about one of the products that they saw, they could easily then share that back to their friends at Facebook or Twitter or other places, thus driving more engaged users back to the website. Another interesting example was Match Move Games, a great gaming site that allowed people to log in with one of their social identities, and one of the things they did was instantly ask the users to invite their friends. The beauty of logging in with a Facebook account or a Yahoo or Google is you can bring your friends list into that website, and you can the website can therefore instantly ask the user to share that with their friends and prompt them to also join in the fun. So what that did was drive a very rich message back to the friends directly at Facebook, for example, here, prompting them to come back over and join again in the game. Chris talked about Universal Music Group before. We deployed JANRAIN Engage with them, and they've seen great adoption by their user base here on Lady Gaga, of people signing in with their social identity, and then the fans are automatically recognized across the different websites. Also, as Chris mentioned, there's a seamless integration with real-time comments, so it creates a very rich environment once the user has come through the front door. They also, again, are seeing great benefits from the social profile data that comes through from a social login and are storing that in the JANRAIN Capture solution, which helps them for future marketing needs and interaction with their customers. So that wraps up all of the content that we wanted to share with everybody. Really appreciate everybody's time, Chris and Jeremiah. Great information. I'm now going to open up. We've got a bunch of questions that have been streaming in here. Let me see here. So I'm going to, here's one for Jeremiah. It's from Jeff, and he asks, does Jeremiah see a time frame when the final stage of his social framework becomes mainstream? Boy, that's a big question.
I think it happens at about 24 hours. No, we're talking years off. When I made my last predictions on the future of the social web, when I was at Forrester, everything I predicted, it was right. But my timeline was twice as long as it actually happened. It happened. I predicted 5 years, and it happened in 2.5. So, and I'm looking at this full time. So it's really amazing how quickly these things are happening. But what I expect to see is Google and or Facebook or Microsoft are going to develop tools. Maybe it's a browser that pulls in all this data and starts to assemble content on the fly. Or even an example of Flipboard are pieces of technology that are starting to experiment with all this context that's coming together. So I think we're just a few quarters away from seeing this early pieces of these things start to happen. Now, that's just the technology that it exists. Corporations tend to lag behind consumers. So this is going to take years. And if you guys are all standing here and I asked you to raise your hand if you're frustrated with your CMS system, I'm sure 75% of you would raise your hand. So integrating this into your existing legacy systems is going to take some time.
Great. Another question, is it possible to over-incentivize engagement to the point where the brand almost feels cheap? Does Jeremiah want to take that, or maybe Chris?
This is Chris. So I think what we found is that the social status and reputation-based rewards need to be aligned with the tone of the community. So we saw already very effective use of these practices within the Huffington Post community that Jeremiah talked about. And there's lots of ways to add social mechanics and game mechanics in ways that are going to align with kind of the goals of the community and kind of how to motivate the types of behaviors that you're trying to drive. So, our approach is we would look at what are the business objectives that you're trying to achieve as a brand or a community or a site operator. What are the behaviors that align with those business objectives? And then what are the whole host of incentives and mechanics that we want to apply to that experience to connect with the audience in the right way? And our prediction is, and this is kind of what we're seeing with the 60 customers that we're working with so far in a wide variety of verticals, is that there are lots of ways to engage consumers by recognizing them for their attention and their loyalty, giving them the social status and reputation that motivates them to kind of continue to engage with you, and just doing it in the right way is a critical part of that. And we'd be happy to help anybody that has further questions about that have a much deeper conversation.
Here's an interesting question from Nancy, highlighting the example you used, Jeremiah, with vitaminwater. She asked, by turning off their website, aren't they risking putting their fare into Facebook's hands? That's, for example, if Facebook changes or disappears, basically, will vitaminwater's online presence also go disappear?
It's absolutely a risk, and I'm not suggesting that you pick one or the other, just corporate website with no integration, or just go to social networks. So it's using all of these things together. And you know, there's downsides anytime you're relying on any third party with your data. You know, if Facebook went down, and Twitter's not the most reliable service over the years, and you're relying on them for SSO, they have some of your fate in your hands. So having multiple forms of integration and logging in is key. And ultimately, we can't get rid of the existing registration page, especially when there's consumer data involved, or credit card, or financial regulated information. So this is going to be a slow process that will happen. But this isn't anything tremendously new. 10 to 15 years ago, we saw Microsoft try to do this with Passport. So there's been multiple attempts at this. Even Oracle has wanted to do this as well.
Great. And Nancy had a follow-up question regarding implementing social sign-on. How would the website know how much contact details they'll have access to? For example, if you implement Facebook as a social sign-on, how much profile info do you have access to? I think I can probably take this one as the local expert on this. That's a great question. And each of the social networks and identity providers opens up different information about their users that's accessible. JANRAIN actually has a website at janrain.com/provider guide, and right there you can actually click on each of the social networks, and you'll see how much profile information and the types of details that are accessible by each of the social networks, which is very eye-opening as marketers see that they can actually pull in interests and hobbies and the friends list and the social graph of the user as they authenticate, and leverage that information to create a more engaging environment at the website. Here's a question to Badgeville from Amelia. What social metrics are available for return site traffic from Badgeville? So Chris, I'll let you handle that one.
Yep. So we have seen a very interesting lift around the key behaviors that our publishers, content, commerce sites, partners are measuring and optimizing across their sites. We are seeing things like return visits in the 20 to 40% increase level. And then, as mentioned earlier, there's registration increases at the 50% level, user-generated content increasing at 100% level, and social sharing increases at over 100% as well. The one thing I would say is that it's really a function of kind of how your community operates today and what are the key behaviors that you're trying to drive. And so in one particular site example, it might be we really want to start to create much more conversations, and we define engagement as user-generated content and contribution and participation. And so in those cases, the incentives and mechanics that we would apply to that use case would be all around participation and engagement. There are many other types of behaviors that can be rewarded, and that's really where it starts, is defining the business objectives that you have for your audience. What are the key behaviors that align with those objectives? And then let's map out the incentives and mechanics that are going to maximize those behaviors. And one other thing that I think is critical to point out here is that while we are leveraging proven techniques from social gaming around engagement, re-engagement, retention, virality, and conversion, and these have been going on for many years now, and they're highly effective techniques, how they get applied to your community is something that we work with our customers on, and that's something that we take on a kind of case-by-case basis.
Great. And here's an interesting question from Carlos asking, and I think all three of us could respond to this one. Are any of you guys afraid of a backlash to social and gamification? Very thoughtful, deep question there.
Yeah, social washing is happening just as greenwashing for the sustainability movement. And at some point, it just becomes overwhelming that we may not want to see what our friends want, or there's privacy issues. But when you look carefully, this is a default behavior of how people want to communicate with each other. This is something, when you go back to these around the fire pits in the ancient times, people would pass on stories. So this is a native behavior that we're already doing. We want to connect. We're social creatures. But I agree, too much of a good thing could overwhelm customers. On the gaming side, I'll let Chris go for that one.
Yeah, I think if you look at other analyst coverage that we've seen in the market, the predictions are that 50% of innovative brands are going to be leveraging these techniques by 2015. So, I mean, the wave is coming. It's up. There's a tremendous opportunity for brands to engage their consumers in brand new ways, which is really about behavior, identity, recognition, and reputation. It is important to apply these techniques in a meaningful way so that the incentives and reputation types of rewards are desired by the audience. And I would also say that one thing that we're seeing as we engage with customers today is that the level of gaminess itself can actually be throttled up or throttled down. For some of the examples that we talked about, fan enablement and kind of competition-based environments, clearly it's about creating a fun, engaging, game-like experience. But we also see, in banking and finance and healthcare, where these techniques are equally being applied, is that the gaminess may be dialed down and the social context will be dialed up. So for example, if you come to a banking site, you probably wouldn't unlock an achievement for that. You might actually if you did connect maybe a bank account. But if you came to a banking site, it might say, did you know that people like you perform this behavior 89% of the time? That is a proven gamification social context technique that no one would describe as a game, but is actually highly effective in driving a desired conversion on a desired behavior.
So I'm seeing the questions from folks in here like Katie and other folks are asking about B2B and Lee. And absolutely, I'm seeing gamification happening in the B2B space. So sales teams have had games for a long period of time. When you go into the sales pit, they have these leaderboards, and there's fill up the thermometer with how much you sell. And now they're applying that inside of in the intranet. So whoever takes the most training classes can get points, and this can apply to anybody in the company. Or even take Adobe. They launched CS5, which is a B2B product to artists and to corporations. And they use Foursquare and other types of games to encourage people to check in to locations to receive the product or a sample of it, and that's a B2B play. Now, the original question was, will people get sick of social? And I already answered that, but will people get sick of gamification? Well, actually, if we look around, this has been going on for a long period of time. Just take a look at your loyalty marketing program inside of your company. That is a game, and that's been going on for a long period of time.
And I think just one other point to mention, obviously with the social web and the ability for consumers to bring their digital personas across to different websites, it really puts a big responsibility on the shoulders of the marketer to use some common sense of how you leverage that profile data. There's obviously clear terms of service around Facebook and others of what marketers can do with that. So it puts a lot of power in their hands, and obviously there will be some along the way here that abuse that and do things in maybe not in the consumer's best interest. But I think we're seeing so many great examples of large websites and brands leveraging it and doing it in the right way to create a better environment for the user. So we actually have time for looks like maybe one or two more questions before we finish off. There's actually one that just came through Twitter. Looks like it might be directed to JANRAIN that's asking, social sign-on is needed, but it scares me to death. There's no way I'm using Facebook this way due to privacy concerns. I guess it is a little bit daunting at times. What I would say is there are terms of service that Facebook has in place that a website needs to agree to, and they aren't onerous. There is, they're clearly laid out that, for example, a website couldn't take the user's profile data and share it with an ad network, for example, but they can use it to personalize content for that web experience. So I think if people follow the rules that are pretty clearly laid out and also kind of use the rule of common sense, you know, and that things will work out. Jeremiah?
Two things I'm hearing from brands. One is make sure everything is opt-in and be really clear about what's going to happen. The second trend we just started to see this quarter is a privacy policy when it comes to social. So some companies, just as you have like a community policy or a social media ethics policy, is one on how your social data will be used, and you make it very clear to customers, just as you would in like an email opt-in form. So now we're seeing that apply to this space as well. So protect yourself by just being transparent and letting customers understand what they're getting into, and always let them be opt-in. You'll be safe that way. Great.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Jeremiah and Chris, thanks for all your time. And
thank you.
Great examples. We had more questions than we could get to, so we will take those offline and make sure that that one of us responds to all the participants that were great at submitting those questions. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.